It's almost game time as the Philadelphia Union are preparing to take on another Eastern Conference foe in DC United, a team that they are currently tied with in conference standings, and a short trip down to ALLCITY Field. Welcome to PHOI Union Preview Show. I'm Renee Washington, joined by, as always, my co-host JP Zapata, and we've got a special guest joining us from Down 95, Dave Johnson, play-by-play announcer for DC United, to help give some insight on what's going on with this squad. Now, Dave, welcome. Nice to have you here. Let's jump right in. What have you been seeing from this group when you look at their start to the season? They have had a 2-3-2 record, specifically against Eastern Conference opponents, of course, led by guys like Christian Benteke. What is it about this DC United team, with all the changes that they've had coming into the season, that's helped them be a middle-of-the-pack team, winning games, scoring goals, and a team that the Union are going to have a really tough matchup against this weekend?
Well, it's a team with a new coach in Troy Lesane. He's a young, dynamic coach, and you're familiar with. Of course, I think he surprised everybody with the job he did with the Red Bulls last year. And I think the most significant thing to know about the character, or at least the DNA or dynamic of DC United, is the first 4 road games, they at least got a point. They got 4 ties. And that right out of the gate, that I think said a lot. Their first game was at New York City, where they did not get a point on the road. They feel like also they've left some points on the table, specifically at home. A 3-2 loss to Orlando, and quite frankly, a couple of those road ties could have been victories for this DC United team. That's kind of a long roundabout way of saying that a new coach has come in a short time and has got a group collectively to believe in a system. And they've come out from the start of the season employing that system. It's a high press system. Sometimes they've been punished by that, but it's brought more rewards than punishment. And Major League Soccer, people always ask me, well, how's Philadelphia doing? How's Seattle doing? I always say, well, I'll answer that in August, because we do have a wonderfully competitive league. It will drive coaches crazy. But again, it's the Seattle comes into Philadelphia just a couple days after being in DC, and they are able to ambush the Union. But that we know here in DC just how good Jim Curtin has developed the program with Philadelphia. So it makes each week full of anxiety. And fun for the fans, not the coaches.
Very true.
Absolutely. Dave, I want to talk a little bit about DC this season, because I don't think a lot of people had expectations looking at them going into it. But listen, it seems like you guys are building a foundation, which is huge. I haven't felt like you guys haven't done that in the past couple of years. But with Troy Lesane in there, obviously Christian Benteke has been a big piece for you guys. What are the realistic expectations for DC United this year? We're talking playoffs?
Well, I think we are talking playoffs, because I think they do have the quality. I mean, again, you mentioned Christian Benteke, Mateusz Klich, Matty Peltola, a Finnish international, has been a wonderful addition to the team. And Christian Benteke is a name that jumps off the page. But it's important to note what a team player he is, how much he wants to be in Major League Soccer, and how much he wants to be with DC United. To give you an example, he came at the end of the 21 season. I'm losing track of my years there. And at that point, if he didn't play a game, nobody would have said anything. But his belief was, all right, I want this to be my preseason. He came mid-season of 21. I want this to be my preseason for 22, in essence, so I can hit 22 in full stride. And he is a special player. He is number one. Now, this is good. This blows everyone away, blew us away. And of course, some teams subscribe these analytical services. This is why I'm glad that I'm almost maybe to the end of my career in the next 10 years, because I was a C student in math, and this analytics just blows me away. But Christian Benteke is number one in the world.
Oof, wow.
Aerial duel percentage. Now, there's a lot of leagues in the world, but he's number one. So he is a special player. What that means is if you give a quality ball to Christian Benteke, and if you have the right players running off that service, that provides some options. And for Benteke, he has been a leader in so many ways. I mean, taking players out to a Wizards basketball game. He's the guy that introduces himself to. It doesn't matter, who at the stadium. And that's an important part of what's going on behind the scenes. You feel like a real family type environment, whatever the cliche you want to use, is being developed. And look, as I just outlined, if this league is that competitive and teams are that close, then it will be certain intangibles that'll make a difference when we are talking in August.
Yeah, it is interesting because for both of these teams, they've surprised many in how they start the season. I know for the Union, obviously their undefeated streak snapped 2 games ago. They've had now dropped back-to-back games, and as you talked about, and what we're trying to forget, that disappointing, especially first half against Seattle. And then on the other side for DC United, a team that honestly I didn't even know what to expect with all the changes that we saw this offseason. I'm just really trying to figure out how to have, what their identity was going to be, how they were going to, come into this season, and to see not only Benteke, but guys like Aaron Herrera as well, Matus, who's also contributing and a great facilitator. They've got so many different, or Mateus, sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, but this is why we have you here to help us. They have a lot of talent across this roster. They're, you look at the results so far in this season, and it's not just, as you mentioned, Benteke. It feels like this team absolutely is different than past seasons in how they're taking approach to each game, the grit, the way that they play, the tempo that they play at. What are some of the keys that have been helping them in translating the culture that they're building into what we've seen? It is still only May. It is a very competitive league, as you talk about, but transitioning that or translating that into how they're being able to step on the pitch each game.
Well, I think it does get back to the coach, Troy was saying. I think man management is so important. And also, it changes. I had this conversation with Luciano Emilio, one of our club legends, a former MVP, a Golden Boot winner in the league. And he was talking about sometimes, if you will, an old style coach, and I don't want to paint things with a broad brush, maybe will not communicate as much as some of the newer coaches. And again, that's not to discredit any veteran coaches, and there's different coaching styles. So I want to make that clear. But what I do want to make clear, what Troy Lesesne does, and his players have expressed, is the man management. He takes an Aaron Herrera and says, a few years ago, to me, you were one of the best right backs in the league. You can get to that level again. So this happens in all sports. Sometimes how do you get the most? Everyone's good in this league. Think about it. There's billions of people on this planet. There's only, I was a C student in math. I can't do the math on how many Major League Soccer players there are, and the designated players and the GAM money and all that stuff just goes right over my head. But the point being, everyone's good. So how do you maximize their talent? So Aaron Herrera is having a great season. Steven Birnbaum, the captain, has been injured. He is on the bench now, but he's been a stalwart at central defense. Yet, we get this partnership of Lucas Bartlett and Christopher McVeigh, at central defense that has worked so well. I've mentioned Mateusz Klich and Matty Peltola, how they work in the center of the park in midfield, and how they've been a complement. So I believe it's the man management, how Troy Lesesne has been able to work with every player. I think about, we have a rookie, and he's from Forest Hill, Maryland. Now, that's actually not too far from where you are in Philadelphia. That's, Hartford County. If people Google Forest Hill, and that's a quick drive up it's even a quicker drive to Chester. But we've got him. He's with us. Jacob Moreau is a rookie from Georgetown, played with my club, the Annapolis Blues, last year. And he made his first start last week. He is showing that as a rookie, he can make an impact. And he told me a story this week about, he had a really good week of training before the Montreal game. He thought, maybe I'll get into the game as a sub. And he didn't. But Troy Lesesne had mentioned to him, don't let that discredit you. We realize what you're doing in practice. Your time is going to come. And it has come, or did come, certainly last week when he made his first start and executed a wonderful partnership with Christian Benteke. So I think, again, it's a long way of answering the question, that when you look at a team that in DC United, certainly why would a lot be expected of given changes, given the results last year. But then you have a coach who seems to know how to get people to buy into what he's doing and also get the best out of them individually. And as a result, it's where you want to be in a league where parity is what it's all about. You in the middle of the pack, and now you've got to make a move, and now that puts some pressure. Quite frankly, DC United, they need to put back-to-back home wins together.
That's a very good point. Yeah, very good point. Obviously, the Union need to find themselves a win. Back-to-back home losses, very uncharacteristic here for the U. But I want to stick with DC United. I want to stick with that attack as well, Dave. Obviously, Benteke, you mentioned Muriel as well. But Periani, this number 10, obviously this league is made of a bunch of good number 10s, but he's interesting. He's very versatile. He can play, but it seems like he's all over the pitch when it comes to the attack. Talk to the Union fans who may not be familiar with Periani. What makes him so dangerous?
Yeah, Gabriel Perani is somebody, again, that Brazil seems to produce a number of these kind of players. But he, I think, I'm not, again, if he can become even a better finisher, look out, because he's got such an amazing feel for the game. As I say, sometimes it feels like he's wearing slippers out there, as he's got such a deft touch. And and again, the key is he has a number 10 like Perani is only as good as who's making the runs. And a player that Jared Stroud is having a good season. If you have a Benteke or Murrell, or if Ted Gudi Pietro is healthy, if you have that synchronicity or that connection, he's going to find you. He's got that ability and quality to read the game in the attacking third. And so, I think he's young, and that's a young team, quite frankly. As much as we talk about Benteke at 33 years old, this is a very young DC United team, and that is exciting because that also it means two things. They either have reached their limit or they have more to climb, and of course, DC United fans hope there's more.
Yes, and honestly, this is even a great opportunity for both teams, tied in standings. A lot of, it's still so early in the season, but we're starting to get a sense of who they are and what they look like. For the Union specifically, coming off of back-to-back losses to RSL and then a really poor performance in the first 45, going down 3-0 and then crawling back to at least make it a 3-2 game versus Seattle. We just had a chance on our end to hear from head coach Jim Curtin prior to the moment, time that we're having this recording. And he was speaking that Andre Blake's not going to be playing for the Philadelphia Union. He's still out with knee soreness. He had to get a procedure done, some fluid drained from his knee, which is never fun. So he's still out for the Union, which means Oliver Zemla gets to start. Other than that, the rest of the units is pretty much the same. The Union specifically have been dealing with inconsistency, especially across the back line and in net with injuries, where they haven't had the same group that they rolled out game to game. Offensively, Daniel Gazdag, who just eclipsed a major milestone as the leading scorer in the club, Julian Carranza, these two have been leading the offense. Quinn Sullivan and Jack McGlynn, different guys have also been contributing. So they're figuring stuff out still. But for the DC United coming into this game, coming off of a win over Seattle, what changes, since you've had a chance now to hear from your press conference as well that you guys had down in DC United, what are some possible changes, or maybe none at all, that we can expect in rolling out and how DC United's going to be starting off the game Saturday night?
I think I don't expect changes, and that's been one of the hallmarks of why they've been they've had again the success to put them in the middle of the pack is it shows in players that come off the bench. There's a clear identification of how we're going to play, and that's not going to change. It's not going to change week to week. It's not going to change whether on the home or on the road. Really, there's only been one match this season. It was against New York City FC, where DC United just did not have the response and energy, and quite frankly, they were spanked early in that game, and that was termed unacceptable by Troy Lesesne. He's definitely preaching also accountability, and since then the response has obviously been the win over Seattle, and now a challenge against Philadelphia. So I don't expect any changes or the team is relatively healthy. Again, that New York City game I referenced, it's not the reason why they lost, but they were missing Mateusz Klich and Aaron Herrera from red cards. But they just know that, look, this is a league that Seattle comes into DC with 6 points. We all know Seattle's better than 6 points. Keeps getting back to parity, but I know Philadelphia, as they approached Seattle on Tuesday, weren't thinking, well, we got this. They're on a road trip, and it will be a problem. And the flip side, nobody in DC is saying, oh, Philadelphia's struggling and they've lost 2 in a row. It just means that the results haven't come, but the quality is there. And again, this is a sport where it's interesting where you see NBA coaches and they can call timeouts but there is something special about coaches that can get their players to play their vision on the field, and quite frankly, the coaches match the players. I think of, obviously I knew Bruce Arena was our first coach, and it's no accident that he's had success wherever he's been. Philadelphia, quite frankly, has a special coach in Jim Curtin and what he has developed in Philadelphia. The expectations, the anticipation, his unique experience, not only playing in the league, but also his ability to manage players that were not part of Major League Soccer. So, I mean, he was part of a first wave of people in this league, if you will. So I think, to Philadelphia's credit, they have somebody in Jim Curtin that has put a certain DNA in the Philadelphia Union. And I think all that needs to tell me that is that after a 3-0 result, it was 3-2, and it could have been 3-3. So that's what makes this a fun rivalry for the fans. Now, of course, DC fans in recent memory, it's been a nightmare dealing with Philadelphia. But that question was brought up this week about, do you think about a couple of years ago going up to Subaru Park and just having a nightmare? But that's not on the players' mind, and so many players have changed. It's on the fans' mind. They still think about Philadelphia in nightmare terms. But I think in terms of players, from DC United's perspective, they realize the opportunity. And I think in Philadelphia's perspective, if I'm playing for Jim Curtin, I know that in terms of results, it has to be better.
Yeah, Dave, you really bring up some good points here. And like I always say, like this, every professional sports for that matter, it's a year-to-year league, right? So every year you kind of have to find ways to reinvent yourself. And, right now the Union, there's been a lot of drama on and off the pitch. So this is going to be a big matchup here for the Union. Like you mentioned, they've had success before going down to Audi Field, but it's a new year. It's 2024, and these guys definitely have to respond. But real quick, my last question, Dave, I want to talk a little bit about the goalkeeping position for you guys. Obviously, Tyler Miller, you had an all-star last year in Tyler Miller. I see Alex Bono started the last 2 matches here. What's going on in the goal there for you guys?
Alex Bono is started all season because Tyler Miller has been hurt since the end of last season. And it shows again where, Alex Bono was a starter in Toronto. And so he was the number 2 last year. But he gets his opportunity, and he shows why he's been a number 1 before. And quite frankly, he's a big reason why the DC United has the points they have. Because, again, as you know, DC United won the game over Seattle 2-1. It was not 5-1. So, Seattle just needed 1 more, and they're celebrating with a point on the road. And the reason, Alex Bono came up with some big games. He's been coming up with, game-saving saves all year. And it's the old cliche about you just want your goalkeeper to at least make 1 game-saving save. And certainly, he's fulfilled that qualification all season long. So that's been a very, strong point. And then, Tyler Miller is back healthy, and he's on the bench, but Alex Bono continues to earn the starting role, and justifiably so, because, quite frankly, if he's not at an all-star level, as some of our fans were saying last week on as they now call it X or Twitter or whatever we call it, that he's the most underrated keeper right now in the league because he's making some big time saves.
Yeah. Definitely not a bad problem to have.
Yes.
No, it's not. It's a long season. It's a long season.
It is. It is. And you can't rely on just your starting 11 or anything like that. You need backups. You need to have depth in every position, goalie included. Last one as we get you out of here, Dave, and we really appreciate your time as we look at these two teams and we talk about, obviously, in the offensive end, the similarities in having leading goal scorers you can rely on. Christian Benteke, who's got 8 goals. You've got combined between Julian Carranza and Daniel Gazdag, 10 goals between the two of them. In terms of assists, for you guys, it's Matthias Klick, it's Aaron Herrera that have 4 they've been 4 assists each. But then also, even for both these teams, hovering around like 1.5 goals per game, 5 shots per game, about 6 corners per game, and of course, 13 points for each team in terms of standings. So we got to ask before we wrap up, in this battle of DC versus Philly, what is your prediction as to how this Saturday night game is going to go?
Well, again, getting back to being a league of 30, it's predictions are always hard in terms of this sport. You could have a team, as you know, playing so well and so many chances. You're thinking, all right, the momentum is in favor of DC, or it's in Philadelphia, and then the other team scores. I do believe that DC United will pull out the win on Saturday, but I know their commitment and sense of urgency to get the 3 points. Now, having said that, the commitment and sense of urgency that they've got that, but they've got to do it on the field. So it's going to be a battle of wills. I think it'll be key if the players that are making off the ball runs to free up some space for Christian Benteke, because again, Benteke, he's got the goals, but as he said, he doesn't care. It's the he'll be the facilitator. He'll be quite happy with that. He just wants to be on a winning, contending team with DC. So I do predict a DC United victory, but that's why we show up every week in this league. It's not like the Premier League where you say, all right, Man City is playing whoever, and sooner or later Man City is going to win. I've got a good feeling about what's going on with this DC United team, and they get back-to-back home wins. I'll stand by that prediction, but I can't wait till they kick it off on Saturday.
We love it.
Yes, it should be a good one. Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff between the two tied teams in Eastern Conference standings. Definitely always an entertaining game when these two face off. I could see a 2-1 game. Honestly, I don't know. I don't ever really know who's going to win at this point in the season. It's really tough to pick. And like you mentioned, you can't clearly state, the Union's going to come in or DC United's going to come in and it's going to be an easy cakewalk. But I do think it's going to come down to, as even Jim Kurt was mentioning, who's winning first and second balls, who's capitalizing on opportunities, and then even on the other side, maybe who's making that one mistake defensively that could be the difference to break through. So I could see a 2-1 game. JP, as we wrap up, do you have a score in mind?
I got goals. A lot of goals down in our nation's capital. I'm going to go with a 3-3 draw, though. I think the Union find a way to a point. I think we got goals coming.
Could be that.
That would be a big victory to Philadelphia. And don't forget, Philadelphia folks my friend Dave Leno does such a great job on the call. So if you can find him,
the man.
Great job on the play-by-play. He's a terrific guy.
I am loving the fact that we have the Dave of DC and the Dave of Philly. Both of you guys doing fantastic job as the voices and play-by-play broadcasters for each team. So Dave Johnson, we appreciate you so much for taking time to join us. You always do a tremendous job on the call and looking forward to this weekend's game as well. And we'll see whose prediction is correct. We've got goals. We've got maybe a barn burner down to the wire game. But either way, should be some great soccer coming up Saturday night, 7:30, DC United versus the Philadelphia Union. So thanks for everybody tuning in. We appreciate you guys. Have a great weekend. Go Union. And we'll see you guys live on our show Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time back on PHOI Union Podcast. See you guys.